I'll take this question.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Amit. I mean, the short answer would be that, we are not there yet. But a longer and more pertinent question is that, do we plan? Because when we say that we want to democratize something, what are the main pillars of it, right? So for example, data, access to data, right, is one critical point. But do we have, how do we access that data? I mean, the previous panels has already listed how we are tricked into giving a data. Any data that we have today, it goes through 5 processes, right? Data is created, it flows, which means that there is a security requirement, then it gets processed so that you make it some meaning out of it, right? And then also gets stored. This is how you would actually generate value out of something, right? Are there ethical ways of, or let's say a framework to do it as of now? I'm not sure. It is something that probably, we signed up for something and we just say we accept. That's all. And then we are giving access to all the data that we have today. So that is the first step. The second part, which is something which concerns, or is at the intersection of what we do as a company, is storing and the compute, right? Is your data being stored in such a way that is inaccessible to any third party, right? You are aware of data harvest, right? Almost all your data is getting harvested by bad actors, and being in India, you're at the intersection of almost all what you call as hostile neighbors, right? So your data harvest is not something new. It's already getting done. You would hear so much of things about it. And the compute part is that today you have been given just what you call as the candies to start something new, right? So you can start doing something early work. But how do you get access to larger machines? And do we have those capabilities in India? I would say that it's something that the country has to have a both short-term and long-term plan. How do we do it? And then the third part, which goes towards developing models and the marketplace. Marketplace is something probably not my forte, but models are very critical. And as you know, any new technology is eventually an equalizer, right? Quantum computing is one such technology. So we have something called as larger problems which cannot be solved using the current computing systems. And that's why that people are looking at building quantum computers. So almost all your chipsets today and the transistors are already at a couple of nanometers. Anything beyond actually will not work. The regular physics doesn't work. So you obviously need what you call as better computing. That is where quantum computers come in, but they are not good for almost all kind of work. So they're good at solving larger problems. So that's where quantum computing gets plugged with AI, which is eventually going to give a lot of power in terms of processing data. And I think you can look at what NVIDIA is doing on quantum computers. But eventually any country, if it is able to develop this technology, that is something where you will become, you actually would be calling as democratizing it, because then you have the power, the hardware with you, and that's where the buck will stop. Okay, so probably this is the initial thing.
Right. So Animesh, I was expecting quantum computing to come and the specialized hardware. Yes, Suvi, your take.
Thank you. I think we couldn't have found a better lever, a better pillar to start this conversation. So overall, let's look at the context. We're hosting the India AI Summit in India, and that's one of the first large conversations that we're doing in the Global South. Why is this important? So we need to understand the difference between telecom and internet. So when it comes to telecom, we've had 4 national telecom policies. Telecom works as a licensor arrangement. When in 2014, roughly you had about 220 million mobile phones. Now you're sitting on 700 mobile phones. The cost of data was very, very high. And it's really important to not just understand, we often discuss compute because it's the most obvious aspect. When a country decides to regulate supplies and creates quotas, then you see it, you feel it. And then you've got the India AI mission, which is saying that for the first time at 280 rupees an hour, I'm making GPUs available to startups. So about 38,000 GPUs were procured. But that's where the conversation only starts. The journey when it comes to the internet And there are 7 layers of the internet, right? We only see content, we see use cases. The conversation where Europe often tends to fix their air conditioning, we start talking about putting the roof over our heads. So we have to first talk about access. We have to talk about critical infrastructure resources. We also need to bring back conversations around root servers in the room. What happens when the submarine cables get cut? And this is a very real geopolitical scenario. When it comes to AI, of course, there's compute. Then there are use cases and application. Then there is even the question of talent. So India owns 40% of world's AI talent. Why is it that you don't have more use cases? Why do you not have more IP, more patent? Why is it that you would still be building in the back end? That conversation is very, very important. So we are talking about when you say truly democratizing AI, it has to work at the level of infrastructure, which is where you have chips, NVIDIA, AMDs of the world. Then it is about language models, and it's not a one-size-fits-all even there. So the question is, can we compete with billions of US dollars in investment? What is happening with Bharat GPT at IIT Mumbai? We're also talking about small language models. Can we look at more local contexts? How do we make sure question of linguistics is brought about? What is Bhashani up to nowadays? Where is it that the APKs are plugging in? Then there is the third aspect, which is about apps and use cases. And that's where consumer tech attention economies get built. So we are not having enough conversation also about success stories. The first lever is who's using AI, for whom are we building AI? Are we just a captive recipient or a consumer of AI? No longer possible, right? So India is also a prosumer of AI. And that's where the conversation that will I only look at what's at the top, what is palpable, the conversations which will happen in a hotel in Lutyens, Delhi, or will we have conversations about that farmer in Koraput, Kalahandi, in Meerut, in Badayu, who's using real-time use cases of applications. So this is where how important is AI for your government? Do they see it as a question where it's going to make them lose or win an election? Where is it, let's say, the intersection of an IIM Lucknow with an IIT Kanpur going to happen? I come from UP, and I'm so glad that IIM Lucknow put together such a well-curated panel. And even at this time, we've got an almost full room, which tells you about why this question is so, so important. So we will have to look at every single framework. The last conversation in this thread, before I yield, is the question of frameworks. So where is it that standards are being set? Okay, okay, we're competing for share of voice also with our neighbors. Very appropriate and such an important question. And I want to reiterate this point that conversation may happen in Vilnius, it may happen in Baku, it may happen in a very, very fancy room where you're not even present. So 5 different aspects to that. There are I-Star organizations that set standards when it comes to the internet. There's ISOC, which allows for community participation. Ishan, I think we'll have to go and request our neighbors to sort of lower their volume so that our conversation can also be heard. So this is where we'll have to discuss how many Indians can be present in those rooms. Sometimes even the question, who does the funding? How many people from academia are going to be present in that room? Okay, so now we've increased our own voice. Great. This is wonderful. जो ज़्यादा ज़ोर से शोर मचाएगा, उसका ही हो रहा है democratization of artificial intelligence. So in real world cases, आपको शोर भी मचाना पड़ेगा, but आपको उस कमरे में मौजूद भी होना पड़ेगा. And that's ISOC. ISOC allows for communities, multi-stakeholder participation. Then there's ITU. ITU is where telecom standards are set, where only multilateral conversations happen. 2 सरकारें आपस में बात करेंगी. आप अगर उस कमरे में पहुंच भी गए, आपको बोलने का हक नहीं होगा. That's where you have to advocate with your MP the importance that he will lay during the time of election and where that funding will happen. Does my demographic dividend or does my core constituency, whether it's MSMEs, whether it is that Vyapari Mandal in Chandni Chowk, are they going to care about this issue enough? Are you going to make enough noise about ensuring that we are not left behind in the conversation? So 2G, 3G, we were following up. But as far as AI is concerned, because we have massive engineering talent and might, we have to do this much in terms of value addition. तो भले ही हम chip अभी नहीं बना रहे हो, but in Sanat we've started looking at packaging, wafers, we're looking at third or fourth generation. But this conversation that this is where the might will be, this is where we'll prepare the future of work, this is where the future of jobs is going to get written. और वो in every district in Uttar Pradesh, there are 72 districts. They have put up incubators. And we are working not just with IITs and IIMs because they'll need less handholding, as InMobi, we're India's first unicorn. And we're so delighted that the second unicorn was built in just 2 years. This is what the phone looked like. Some of you were present in the previous session. Each time you press the power button, it serves content on the lock screen across 72, about 550 million devices. That means 55 crore log, bina phone unlock kare, they can consume content across 18 categories. That's science and technology 101. Yes, we're using artificial intelligence and we're ensuring that content delivery is happening so that they're able to be clued in. The third app is called Glance AI. In just one selfie, it will generate 18 looks for you. That's downloadable. And that is disrupting how marketplaces are being made. Commerce is being written. We've connected 450 new suppliers. They can ship world over. It's your personal stylist, and that's where we're saying fashion commerce is inclusive. It's aspirational. So a lot is happening in India. We need to discover that. We need to take pride in that. And this democratization needs to be seen as a flywheel model, not just chip, but framing, setting standards, making sure you're part of the discourse. And that's why this summit truly matters.
Great. So I heard prosumer and I heard government losing election over AI. So if that is what it makes the difference. So if it is mattering and if it is government is losing election, that is where AI is making the impact. And then I heard IIM and IIT getting clubbed together, and that's very interesting. At IIM Lucknow, we have an AI lab. So that was like 8 years back, it was set up. And at that time, the question was, why an AI lab in IIM? It should be in IIT. And that's where AI-enabled or tech-enabled businesses thought was produced. And it was great at that time. The leadership at that time, they thought about it, and they actually have an incubator center where they talk about AI or tech-enabled startups. So, yep, very interesting. My take on this is, if you look at it, what we are looking at is AI available to everyone? Is a new entrepreneur, can they actually start an AI business? And do they have sufficient information or sufficient models? I mean, today we know you can get all kind of AI models available, all large language models are available, which is like open sourced. But is that only the thing? Now, when we started our journey, when we were doing the POCs, that is what it looked like. But when we started scaling, and we realized that, no, that is not the only thing. Compute and then the data are the other two challenges. And then the third challenge, which is not coming out very clearly by anyone here, and we are not talking about, is the operationalization of it. If you're getting millions of data points and you are working on it, how you're going to take care of it. So you have to have an operational excellence in that direction. So these are my take. Let's go ahead and work a little on the access to compute. So what is the biggest barrier to accessing sufficient compute? If I put that question to the panelists.
So Amit, maybe, I also started my journey about 8 years ago. Okay, 8-9 years ago. I see that, there are a lot of things probably, entrepreneurs can take it today, which was not available, let's say, a decade ago. So let's say you want to run a startup. You need a lot of other things also, not only the tech, right? In that way, you have sufficient access, at least getting the basic things for you. So you have, there's not much of a compute in that sense. But let's say you want to develop some early models, and you want to do some POCs, that we believe is broadly available, at least as far as you're looking at classical computers, in traditional computers in place. But when we look at more refined and more sophisticated models, that is where you actually end up paying a premium. That's where actually having, associated with some of the most reputed labs, or let's say, startup incubators, is going to be helpful, because uh, eventually everything will boil down to how fast, how good, how accurate you can process something, and where does all of this actually come from. So I have, we do something also called all neural networks, but kind of a bridge between quantum computers. But the access to computing, especially quantum computing, is not very easy. You get only very couple of bits just to try something out, but otherwise you end up paying premium. Now, in the recent past, we have seen what happens. We have seen it ourselves, right? That a president can be taken out, right? Doesn't it give you a threat that imagine that in today's time, laws don't are not applicable to the weaker ones. I mean, to the powerful ones, right? So the powerful one can exercise their whatever act they want to do. Think about the times when we are not the ones who are holding this compute, this power, the hardware, the entire infra. If we are not the ones who are holding it, where does it leave us? So there won't be any what you call as a East India Company coming again, because we'll obviously become digital colonies if we don't take care of the data. So that is something I definitely feel that it's very important that, where the policy actually comes in, Amit, because without the policy as to who is the actual owner, and that cannot be decided 10 years from now, right? That's where the data has to be safeguarded. So let's say something which is still kind of very open is about how DPDP actually, works in the case of, AI. I mean, that is something very not clear. At least we have seen some discussions, but there is not much as to how my personal data is getting, used. In terms of the compute part, I had mentioned that, even in compute, we are not building those as of now. So there is a semiconductor mission, and there a lot of work is happening, but we are not there yet. So that actually definitely puts it's a very important that we have our long-term plan, mid-term plan clearly charted out, because 10 years down the line, all of these, you will not have the time to go back and rework on your drawing board, right? So you have to start now that, okay, you are actually in a moving train. So of course you have to use AI. Of course you have to do whatever that is required, and you can't be untouched by it. But then you have your planning, you have your strategy right as to how do you want to go in the next 5 years. How do I have, so of course, when the policy comes in, the innovation will actually come down, but then actually that has to do more with the ethical practices, establishing law around it. How do you actually enable access as well, right, to the data? So like, for example, if you want to do, you can use homomorphic encryption to process data. That actually is one of the ways where people are working on. Without understanding the whole context, if encrypted data can be used to develop models, that is something very important. Looking at the third part, which is the developing newer technologies which will augment AI. So we talked about quantum for AI, but there's also a AI for quantum, which is that you can accelerate the development in many other fields. I think it is the only time now when you can think truly out of the box. Almost all fundamentals of maths and physics comes into picture, because apart from that, everything else is taken care, right? So if you look at the principal fields will become more relevant, and AI can be used to develop technologies which will eventually empower you, right? Whether it is in terms of compute, or whether it is in terms of storage, or we can talk about other applications of AI plus quantum put together, and that actually is very relevant for a country like us, because today we cannot be ignored. I think that is this is something that our Prime Minister has enabled, that today we are the largest players in the consumption. But now how do we also, and what she mentioned about prosumers, but we definitely feel that it is the time that we slowly shift, and that is something, if you can see, we have parallels. You can look at China, how they were actually the ones who were only doing the service part, but then also building products. But it's a long-term journey, and I think that is very much achievable. One question probably I would want, probably from my side, is that how does an OpenStack part, like in the case of finance and even the payments, we had that OpenStack. How will that actually capture? Because in the OpenStack, you had only to processing, but here it is also about capturing something, processing, and it's more complicated than probably just doing a transactional part, right? How does that work? So
Sure,
yeah,
we'll come
thank
to
you.
that. Yep.
Thank you. I think everything that had to be said has been said. I'll just add a couple of more threads. I don't see compute as a problem in isolation. I think we have to see compute as the infrastructure layer. So when you talk about AI, when you talk to CTOs and CISOs largely, you have to see it as an AI stack. So how you would deal with technology and deployment, and therefore, of course, the cost becomes a barrier. It's easier said than done. The larger companies, legacy companies, can make that kind of an investment. So we've been making a very, very strong proponent to the idea that GERD needs to go up from 0.3 to 1% of our GDP, if not 2%, if not 3%. We have to ensure who's going to see. It's very, very easy to understand. In any large-scale technology deployment adoption, the entry barrier is always going to be the highest for startups. It will be the highest for academia, and that is where. And this is a very unique contradiction, because startups are nimble-footed. Startups is the space and the ecosystem where innovation is going to happen, where disruption is going to happen. But who's normally out of the ambit? It is the same people, because imagine you've got a young IIT Kanpur grad in his second year, third year, coming out with a brilliant product idea. But that's what he's going to focus on. So this is where conversations, this is where you look at a Y Combinator kind of an ecosystem, you look at hand-holding, you look at mentorship, you look at networking, and you also look at a VWork/model of a network compute architecture. So not only does it have to be in a data center which is accessible, they're saying, if Muhammad will not come to the mountain, can we get the mountain to move? How do we make sure that you look at government as an interlock, government as a priority agency that starts thinking like a CTO, that starts thinking like a CEO. So UP is making an attempt for the first time to create the first AI city. And when this conversation started, we started talking about, don't just see it as giving very large, beautiful pieces of land at subsidized rate. And Andhra has also done that, right? They gave you land at 1 rupee. But then what is equally important is an innovation cluster-based approach. Will you create shareable resources of compute? Can governments at scale do the procurement and ensure that sustainable architectures are made available, which are consistently available? I don't want the startup founder, and being an entrepreneur, I've often said, is a very, very lonely journey. So I have huge respect for anybody who decides to make that journey. You have to first look for a good co-founder. You also have to advocate for yourself constantly. And it's not going to happen in one day, because you are competing with good, clean food. You are competing with basic amenities. And the stakeholders that any government, I'm not talking about us, ours, I will talk about prioritization. So that's why when you look at nuclear deterrence, it gets disproportionate amount of attention. So what we've been arguing all along is we've been arguing for upskilling teachers and professors and startup founders to advocate for themselves. That is why ensuring when budget documents and drafts are being written, that IIMs also speak to not just their education committees at a FICCI or a CII or industry bodies and associations. Remember, it's in October and September that inputs start getting collected, saying what is it that you would want your ideal budget to look like. That is where interventions have to be made, saying, I don't want to use that term, and it's very infamous. हम घास नहीं खाएंगे, तभी हम cloud या AI power नहीं बनेंगे. With that balance, if we can look at the importance and the attention that this issue needs, it's as urgent as your house being on fire. And I do not exaggerate when I say that. So data centers have to be stable. They have to be accessible. The ideal word would be, for the lack of a better example, is McDonaldization of data centers. Can you make it as accessible? It's the last thing that I want our founders to worry about, our researchers to worry about. And when you're looking at an innovation first mindset, startup capital ban gaye hum. We've also created a lot of unicorns. We've made sure we've done things right. So infrastructure and compute seen as that layer where the amount of emphasis that you would pay on creating great highways and roads is the amount of emphasis that we need to start paying as far as compute is concerned. And that's where negotiations are going to happen, because you have to have something that you will give so that you can get this. When quotas get drafted, you have to be at an equal footage, an almost equitable footage, to be able to negotiate that position that you will get access to compute. So when global negotiations are taking place and you're discussing with the USTR and you're discussing large trade treaties, this is where you need to make sure that you put this conversation front and center and not at the periphery.
Right. So I'll put up a view here. Think of it. We have large language models. We have open source model available. You also have compute access. Of course, it comes at a cost, but you have compute access. So what you're doing, you're building your own application using open models, and you're running on compute. So essentially, open model is free, compute is costing, and you are earning some money. So what is happening? You are earning 100 rupees. You're giving 70 to compute. 10 to maybe having that model run as the way you are. What you are earning, 20. You are getting marginalized. Now, this is how, and this is what everyone wants us to think. Make more data centers, but whose chip is getting in? NVIDIA. Right? Every data center has NVIDIA. NVIDIA is $1 trillion. Tomorrow it will be 3. Is there a new AI accelerator? Is there a new chip which is actually making things different? As a founder or as a startup, do I have an option to collaborate with another startup, maybe quantum compute, to work on that piece of hardware which I can run that model on that hardware? So I need to know that model too. So this is more like a chase game. I provide you a model, I provide you compute, you actually take it, pay me, you earn something, you become an AI definitive startup, but you are not. You're actually in a loop. So you have to own your own AI stack. So if you don't, I mean, you'll get a chance to talk once we open up, and we'll do that. So that's my bit here. I'll just take another 1 minute on it. I have seen for the compute to be provided, like IIM has been providing AI lab, and likewise there are other institutes, CSR funds, who are actually having smaller AI labs. They are not for profit, so they are not like big players who are actually charging a bomb for H100s and A200s. They are only making it sure that they cover their cost. So that's one part. Yeah, so coming from that to the data part. So we are talking about access to compute and access to data. We can rent compute, but what do we do with the data? So we start with you. What is your thought on it?
Thank you. So it's at the core of everything we do. Let's go back in time. And the entire hype, which is what one of my professors said, Abhi aisa kya ho gaya? Why is everybody only talking about this? This is just a large machine learning project. These are statistical data which we have been working with. So from the 1970s, the Alan Turing Institute has been working with it. What changed also needs recognition. So for the first time, not just nerds, geeks and coders, but your grandmother and your chachi and your mommy and your aunt could look at the ingredients in their refrigerator, and Samsung also did that and said, here are 5 dishes that you can make with this. They could also analyze the house plants that they were growing, and they could now tell you, you are actually killing it with love. You are watering it a little too much. It's not that your plant needs watering all the time. a lot of these made sure that AI became conversational. AI increased its user base, which also means, very interestingly, more data sets. And you have to understand that when it comes to India, we are very, very unique. So for a lot of people, the first time that they will go out in a month, and especially women sometimes, will be a visit to a doctor. The way they will describe their symptoms will also be very unique. You know, sar mein keeda chal raha hai. And the doctor will then figure it out कि मुझे ये हो रहा है. We used to tell these jokes in the Reader's Digest saying, the doctor, it hurts here, here, here. Then he'd say, you have a broken finger, right? So you would see that as a joke. But that's where contextual learning, that is where the richness of data. And I go back in time again. I was with a bank and we were working with a municipal corporation and they were about to go bankrupt. And we said, would you open up your data to us? And they said, madam, we prefer to go bankrupt. We will not give you data because that will lead to municipal bonds being created. And of course, we understand that. But like this summit, the 3 pillars being people, planet, progress. The moment you take away the process part of it and you insert technology, some people felt that their power would go away. And which is where we wrote one of the earliest reports for METI and we talked about open data and open governance. So you may even get a data set, but that data set would be scrubbed clean. So very, very important at every school, with every parent, with every teacher, with every official that we meet, and it could be any official, any ministry, this urgency that you need a behavior change conversation. Mask nahi lagate the na. You would see in COVID, you would see a mask at your chin. And it took a lot of effort to tell people that it would be here, it would be here, it would be here, hai mask, but jahan hona chahiye, wahan nahi. So you have to understand, it's not just data. It's the kind of data, it's the format in which it is being given. Is it pre-processed data? Is it raw data? Is it usable data? Is it data that you can do anything with? This conversation that you have to treat it, and I disagree with anybody who calls it oil. I think data is even more precious than oil. Oil is limited. You will put it in a barrel. There's very little things that you can do with it. It's expendable. The more that you torture data, the more that you investigate data, the newer products will be created. But it has to be like the internet. It has to be interoperable. You need to be able to access it. And that's where we call for a national movement. We call for sensitization, much like the Pulse Polio campaign, much like the Sarva Saksharta Abhiyan, that this data is precious. So the second question that we get is, how should we price data? अगर उस data के साथ कुछ कर ही नहीं रहे तो उसका value भी zero है ना. You can keep that data with you, you can hold on tight, but it's an idea that's no good because it's not ever going to see the light of day. So then what do we need to do? And that's a great segue into the next probably leg of this discussion, which is the role of policymakers. This is where building capacity, this is where telling people and understanding in every conversation what's in it for them, what's in it for you. How do you make sure that you find a global problem, you put a solution in the middle of it, you put the idea that this will help them build their legacy. So then you get an AI data coach that's valuable. Then you get data sets that are being available. About 13,000 data sets have already been made available. Then we have to understand, like the US creates trusted corridors for their manufacturing channels, that if this is coming from country A or a certain vetted party, if it meets parameters, it will only then be part of my supply chain. Because data poisoning is also very real. Data sets are vitiated. Models and large language models are hallucinating. You see that as a joke today, right? There are these reels where they'll say, here is a cup, but it's closed from the top. How do I still drink water? And the models don't know what to do with it. They're being able to see the image. They say it's a fancy or a party trick cup. So that's where common intelligence, that's where the natural language processing aspects come in. So don't attach too much value to data. We have to become a data intelligent nation. How do we do that? By making sure that sunlight becomes the best disinfectant, by not asking for just black boxes, by ensuring proliferation, by ensuring that you create an ecosystem that works with startup founders, that works with creating regulatory sandboxes where in a trusted environment with labs, with that vetting process, you're able to access and build upon that data. So the last example that I wanted to leave you with was COVID. During the peak of COVID, you had to give up your privacy and you had to mark your location and say, I may have temperature which may be this high. And that helped save lives. That helped isolate people with comorbidities. So this is where understanding what is the trade-off and understanding that as an institutional mindset, we have to put that framework together at a Mahanagar Palika, at a Panchayat level, at a Taluk level. That's where you'll get the richest data, right? So decisioning solutions and very rich ideas and products at population scale can be created, provided you're liberating that data.
Animesh.
Still want me to add something on top of it?
No, I don't.
Yeah, it was very nice listening to you. So I have almost forgotten the question. Probably.
The question is, how do you see data?
It's the life question.
Okay. Yes. So probably just a couple of points. See, if you want some comparison, you can think of the AI, the algorithm or the model, right? Like a tiger, and the data is more like the other animals in the forest, right? So what happens is that the more this hunting will happen, the digestion will happen, okay? The essential data that is there, okay? And the land of the tiger eventually becomes more powerful. To what extent actually we want this lion to be powerful is a question that whether it should come back to us.
Very, very well said.
Right? So that's probably that where we are. Like lot of digestion is already in process, and as the digestion happen, it'll eventually become more and more better. But eventually we are the ones who are going to face it, and of course in the times of usability and the risk, right? So let's say some or the I would say the downside, like it is something. It could be, let's say, privacy, right? So something which is more usable has to be, the privacy will go down, right? And then something which is very, very, there's so much confidential data which is there, but then usability becomes low. So what is that soft spot which is maximizing these two is where actually it cannot be done just by one individual, but the policymakers have to define that, let's say, some genetic data, can it be made available to all the market players? Do we have a mechanism to stop that? No idea. It is probably, I'm probably as clueless as you guys are, but I feel that it is important to start the dialogue which talks about what kind of data needs special, approval. What kind of data cannot just be available to the public, because the number of bad actors have always been more in the society, for ages. It's not today. It's not that only today it is like that. But as technology grew, for example, anybody who controlled land ran the territory. Anybody later on, it became the waterways. Then you have what you call is that anybody who has better missiles, air. Anybody who controls air is the powerful one, right? Now we are going towards space, and we are coming to data and AI. And then you have quantum. I'm saying that, all of these things are becoming more and more powerful. And it is important that you do not say that, okay, no, we don't want to be powerful. Because if you say that, then you will probably end up having the fate of the president, right? Who has just been captured. So my point is that you will have to have that thing in hand. What is the best way is something, it needs more nuanced discussion, probably not for this, but it's a food for thought. Like how do you want the line stronger to be? How stronger you want it to be?
Right.
Right?
Very, very
Thank you.
good thoughts.
With your permission.
So I would say, can we, let me conclude on it, and then we kind of take the question, because we are just having 7 minutes.
Just 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay.
Animesh asked me, ये कागज आप हमेशा रखते हो या कभी-कभी? This is my Santa wish list. जो भी मौका मिले, जो भी प्लेटफॉर्म हो, that's where इसको हम कहते हैं हम यहाँ गुहार लगाएंगे. So you have to keep knocking. This was the conversation that we really wanted to have because I wear the policy hat. I'm in public policy. I believe public policy has to be after public consultation and in public interest. So with this budget, we showed the intent that we're giving tax holidays till 2047 for infrastructure, for data centers. My only ask would be we need to add a little more in terms of incentives. We want to make sure that we balance this with not just foreign players, but Indian companies have to also grow so that the data sovereignty conversation and Atmanirbharta is nicely balanced. Because when the Prime Minister says $6.3 trillion economy, you need at least 100 champions to be built in India. So that sunset clauses and incentivization coupled with tax holidays, coupled with a global attention, which goes all the way from the metros to every single tier 2, tier 3 city, that this matters. And this is equally yours and not just some esoteric plan that's being made in Delhi. That's all that I wanted to add. Thank you.
So now looking at the data, there are three aspects to it. We say data should be made available. What about the privacy? Do we want every startup to have access to all the private data? What about competitive edge? A company who is producing something and it is creating data. Data creation or getting data into a proper shape require effort. So that's the competitive advantage. What about that? Now, there is the third aspect, which we can think more from the point of view that is government data, the data which we all are producing, something can be taken as a national resource, something which is scrubbed and made available for people. But then, even if you provide data, what's happening? Is that going to create a value for an enterprise? Entrepreneur or a startup, will they be able to use that data? Because that's available to everyone. So either you are building something on top of it, otherwise these are the three aspects which has to be very well dealt with before you, so data is not like compute, where it could be made available, you can waste it, but with data you can actually create weapons or you can create personalized attack, which is unwanted. So of course that is where the policies and other thing comes into picture. Now, I have 4 minutes and I want to open it to the, yep, so I know you people are excited about it, so yep, go ahead.
Hi, this is Anand Gunani from VAMR. And my question, there's a couple of thoughts and questions here. One is when you said about data. Now say for example, when you talk about intellectual property, somebody makes a song, there's DRM embedded and it monetizes, IPRS fetches the like royalties and shares it, right? Now if my data about any parameter related to me is in 100 different or maybe 1,000 different databases, thanks to cookies, which we always say accept all, and many other things, why shouldn't I be making royalty out of my data? And how should we not actually make a policy and framework where my data earns money for me? आपने बोला ना कि data hack करेंगे क्या? Right? So that's the thought to that. And second is about deep technology. You spoke about quantum, but being the use case capital of the world, being a prosumer, using everybody's great technology for us to create use cases is at the business layer. And we are doing some things on semiconductors, of course, but on overall deep tech from a policy or from a provisioning or from incentivizing, what's going on?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll just add after you.
Okay, sure. See, I mean, I started with the first point was the data, right? So as of now, I think that it's very unclear that who actually will be able to monetize this data, because you're using any particular software, any license agreement that you get into, you eventually give up that right. Okay, I mean it'll come to the very ethical part of it, because you will eventually want to say, I have given this data, yes, it's my data, I have trained it, right? But then you are the one who has also signed up for the data to be used. right? So I mean, Huh.
which you don't see.
which you have not seen.
Terms and conditions that we always have to quickly register for a new app.
What I'm saying is yes. What I'm saying is that now probably you can probably put, you can try to probably put regulations. You can try to see that how it is best for both the parties. 10, 15 years down the line, you don't even have that option, right? So tying a noose around this is important not only for just an individual, but at a country level as well, right? How will the sovereignty be protected? Because that eventually boils to there. Leads to. That's what I'm telling. That right?
Animesh, I just wanted to add
Please.
one short point. So I started with telecom versus the internet, and this debate also was raging when net neutrality came in. And we said, should internet be treated like a utility? Should it be treated like water as a resource? This is where it's very important to understand. In 2016, we were faced with call drops, and there was a demand for investment in the telecom infrastructure, right? And then OTTs came in. It's very, very important to understand that there is an ROI involved, and that's the trade-off. That if you want somebody to invest, this is very, very expensive infrastructure. So when you're doing the consent layer, what the DPDP is done now, it allows you to withdraw consent. And it ensures that every single time an app is using your data, and if they change the purpose for which it is going to be used, okay? Data has to be treated differently when it is at rest, when it is in transit, where it's going to be stored. It's taken us almost 15 years to get to this stage, right, from the first draft. So always remember that somebody's paying for, and this is the trade-off between convenience, this is the trade-off between innovation, and this is the trade-off between what is being built on top of that layer. इसलिए हम कौन क्या कर रहा है is very, very important, and who's paying for that is equally important.
Yeah.
So advertising in a way subsidizes a lot of things. That's why it's very important when there's a sluggish economy, the spends and money in circulation remains because somebody is paying for it.
All right. So just to conclude on that, and maybe if there is another question, yeah, okay. So we'll come to that. Now, that is where we have been given a lot of reasons why the data will be used. Right? It is my data, as you rightly said, it's my data. I may sit with it, and I may make no use of it, but I don't wish to disclose. Like in the earlier session, there was a discussion. Decathlon says you have to have your phone number, otherwise I'll not bill you. Why? I don't want to give you my phone number, and that's it. So even if I want to use my phone, and in my phone, it hears things. I'm talking about data, I'll see some data center coming in. So I have to have right where I should stop these things. So again, we are coming from democratizing to a different part altogether, but nevertheless, that's an important piece. Yeah, last question if we may have that.
आई थिंक सो लाइक यहाँ पे सब लोग हिंदी जानते होंगे, तो आई कैन टॉक इन हिंदी. ओके, मैं एक चीज़ पूछ रहा था, यहाँ पे कितने लोग जीमेल, हॉटमेल के अलावा कोई अपना आपकी मेल अपने खुद के डिब्बे पे डलती है? किसी की कोई बिना जीमेल के इस्तेमाल कर रहा है? या किसी का मेल बॉक्स उसके घर पे खुद के डिब्बे पे लाइनेक्स का डिब्बा लगा हो, उस पे जा रही हो? मतलब मेरा कहने का मतलब है कि आज हम लोग 25 साल हो गए और हम लोगों का एक खुद का मेल बॉक्स नहीं है, और जो आप लोगों की पॉलिसीज़ हैं मैं भुक्तभोगी हूँ. मतलब मैं बता दूँ, क्योंकि डेटा सेंटर की यूपी की जो पॉलिसी है उनने पावर पे दे दिया, पावर इस्तेमाल करोगे. आज की डेट में जो सर्वर्स के साइज थे वो कहाँ हो गए? मैं खुद मैनेज करता हूँ 15 करोड़ के करीबन पेटेंट डेटाबेस. ठीक है?
So if you can, sorry,
नहीं
have to cut
सर,
in short.
सर मैं
We can do that discussion maybe outside. If you have a question, please go ahead.
सर क्वेश्चन यही है कि जो 47 तक हम लोगों ने दूसरों को दिया है कि सब उनका तो उन्हें तो टैक्स नहीं देना पड़ेगा और हमें टैक्स देना पड़ेगा. तो हम कैसे पहुंचेंगे?
I'm sorry.
आज हम जीमेल में
Sir,
नहीं बना
I
पाए।
have to stop you there.
हम
If you
लोग
have a question, please.
सर बस क्वेश्चन का क्या है सर, ये पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क है जो मैम ने कहा था कि अंदर की जो भड़ास है कम से कम हम रखेंगे नहीं, आप लोगों के माध्यम से दूसरे के पास जाएगी।
Thank you so much for that.
We are toothless to address your question. Okay, I can, but I would, one
So
point.
thank you everyone, and I would like
Thank
to.
you. Once again, round of applause for the amazing panel which we have. And for the moderator as well. And now, just before we proceed to the memento presentation, thank you, audience, for coming from almost all the diverse backgrounds, from public sector, industry, academia. We are really happy to have you. And I'll quickly brief you about not too much of a presentation, but a just quick view what actually I Am Lucknow enterprise incubation is there. So the first thing which comes in the mind is I Am Lucknow has 2 campuses. So yes, I Am Lucknow has 2 campuses, one in Noida, one in Lucknow, and it has been, collaborating at best international and national level. This is our structure, and with my colleague Nikhil Bhatt, we also, if you have any queries related to blockchain technology, you can always reach out, because we are also setting up a center for blockchain excellence in collaboration with government of UP. EIC has already been collaborating with various public sector institutes and organizations, and together we are creating this impact in the AI ecosystem. So first, now I'll request Amit Srivastav sir to present a memento of gratitude to the speakers. Would request to present to Animesh ji also. And now I request Vineet Kumar Pruthi sir, who is the director IT at National Informatics Center, to please facilitate our moderator. So NIC team has been our SPOC and coordination in tandem. We have made this panel discussion successful. So, thank you so much. We can join for a group photograph, please. We have Professor Satyabhushan Das from I Am Lucknow. Sir, if you can please come on the stage for a group photograph. And fellow participants, if you wish to, please join. That's come. Electronics and IT, Abhishek Singh sir, and all our esteemed panel. Some of the speakers were unable to join, but really thank you so much for joining in. All the participants who have come from different part of the world. We have good representation from India and other countries also. I would like to thank all the I Am Lucknow Enterprise Incubation Center, our leadership, my colleagues Subrat and Nikhil ji, who have provided their support. And thank you, audience. Thank you so much. Thank you.